I'm Dave, and on today's episode of Reworked, we're going to be trying to diagnose a engine whine in the 67 Volvo 1800S behind me. I started it up last week, and it has this strange noise. So first thing I did was take the fan belt off to eliminate the source of the noise as being either the generator or the water pump or the pulleys, and that didn't change anything. The noise really seems to be coming from the front of the engine, even with the belt off and the water pump and the generator not turning. So the next most likely candidate is the oiler on the timing gear. What I'm going to go through today is how to take everything off the front of the engine to get to the timing cover, take the timing cover off. I inspect the timing gear and the oiler, and then put it all back together. Now, spoiler alert, the oiler was not pointed correctly in my car, and I hoped when I saw that orienting it correctly would solve the problem, but after I put everything back together, the noise still persists. So I'll show you all the steps to go through, and whether you have a noise or whether you just need to get to your timing gear or the oiler, this video will show you how to do that. The Volvo 1800 has a B18 1.8 liter inline 4-cylinder engine using, in this case, dual SU carburetors, and it has a fiber timing gear driving the camshaft. And the theory we're going to work on today is that the timing gear oiler is not oriented correctly, and that it's the cause of the noise that you'll hear in this running clip next. Here's an overhead view of the front of the engine. The Volvo Green Book manual does not say for removing the timing gear cover that you should or must remove the radiator. It says remove the fan, remove the belt, remove the fan and pulley from on the front of the water pump. It does say to remove the front stabilizer, which I believe is their term for the sway bar, and I don't know why that would be necessary. It doesn't seem to be in the way, but the radiator seems to be much more in the way. So following the instructions, I'm going to start with removing each of the bolts on the front of the fan. Well, first I'll remove the fan belt, then remove each bolt on the front of the fan, pull this pulley off of the front of the water pump, and then we'll have a better view from below of the bolts holding the timing cover onto the engine. The first step is to loosen the fan belt by loosening the generator bracket. That requires 2 half-inch wrenches, and right here, but I can't do both on camera. And hold, oh wait, maybe I can. With this generator mounting bolt loosened, we can now scoot the generator in towards the block. That gives us slack on the fan belt. We can remove it from there. With the fan belt off, now we have to remove the fan from the front of the water pump pulley, and it's held on by 4 half-inch bolts. You can loosen each through a gap between the fan blades, then rotate the fan to the next one and continue until they're all off. And it's actually easier to get to the bolts from the driver's side, so I switched over here to continue backing them out. With the 4 bolts removed, we can remove the 4-bladed fan and the belt. And the pulley. The next step in the Volvo manual is to remove the crank pulley bolt down here at the bottom of the engine, but while I have the car lowered right now, I'm going to go ahead and remove these timing cover bolts that would be easier accessed from above. The bolts that hold the timing cover on are 7/16 of an inch, and I'm going to loosen or remove these 4 from the top before we lift the car. Now we'll raise the car with the lift and work on the crank pulley bolt from below. Here's the crank pulley bolt, and you need to put the car in gear and engage the parking brake, and in this case I chocked the wheels in order to break this bolt loose. Some cars, like a lot of BMWs, have a crank lock pin that you can install back at the flywheel to lock the crank, but as far as I know this car doesn't. So when you're backing the bolt out, it's going to make the engine go backwards, and car's in first gear, so it wanted to roll back against the chocks, and so there was some movement where at first where the pulley moved, but eventually I got to where it was compressed against the chocks and the bolt came loose. So this is a 13/16 bolt, crank bolt and washer. Now remove the crank pulley. When we've gotten all the bolts off the front of the timing cover, we have to remove these 2 1/2-inch bolts through the oil pan, and we have to loosen it enough to pull the timing cover off without damaging the oil pan gasket. Now that they're all loose and almost out, we're going to pull each of these timing cover bolts. They are not all the same length, so you're going to want to keep them in order for when you put it back on. If it's going to be a while, a good way to do this is to get a piece of cardboard and poke holes in it, and then in the shape of the timing cover, and then put each bolt in the hole, like here at the bottom, very short ones. Next one up, somewhat longer. Same as number 2, etc. Now we're going to start to rock and gently remove the timing cover. This is the front main seal. This is an updated one. These cars originally came with a felt front main seal. To get one of these rubber ones, you have to have a front timing cover that is milled out a little bit to accommodate it, or you can get your timing cover milled. with some gentle prying here and here, I eventually got it to move forward. Apparently in doing so, I've damaged the oil pan gasket here. So I'm gonna work the screwdriver around the outside from both sides, try to inch it forward, hopefully not rip the oil pan gasket anymore. With a little gentle prying, I've got the timing cover loose all the way around. I did end up with a cut or rip here and here to the oil pan gasket. I don't believe I'm going to bother replacing the oil pan gasket. When I put it back together, I'll just put extra RTV at those two locations. So now we move it off of the crankshaft and bring it down. So there's the oil pan gasket parts stuck to the bottom of the timing cover. All right, behind the timing cover now, we've got the fiber timing gear, the crank gear, and then this is the oiler that is supposed to spray oil into the two gears. So in theory, this is what's not working and why we've got a noise. So I'll take the oiler out and then see if it's clogged. Looking at the picture in the Volvo manual for orientation of the oiler, mine is not pointed correctly. This edge is supposed to be parallel to this slanted part of the casing, so it should be 30 or 40 degrees more clockwise. So I'm going to take it out and make sure it's clean, and then make sure I know where the oil sprays from it, and then we'll put it back in. When I was filming, I was wrong about the orientation of the oiler. I said 30 or 40 degrees clockwise to fix it, but it actually needs to go about 70 degrees counterclockwise, so that the corner that is shown here in the picture with the arrow is pointed towards the intersection of the gear. And you can loosen the oil sprayer with a 1/2-inch wrench. There's where the oil comes out of it. So I've blown it out with compressed air. Now we're going to spray some brake clean through it and see if the brake clean comes out the hole that the oil spouts out of. Yep. So it's not blocked. I think it was an issue of where it was pointing. It just wasn't pointing at the intersection of the gears. As we screw this back into the block, we need to make sure we keep track of where the nozzle here is pointing. So you can see that the top is not symmetrical, it's offset, and you can see circles there that show essentially where the threaded area is, and the nozzle is at this top right corner. So In the end, it's going to be oriented like this, and the nozzle will be spraying into the intersection of the gears. So as we screw it in, we need to keep track, make sure we know where it ends up pointed. I don't have a torque spec for this, but it can't go another revolution of tightening and still point at the intersection of the gears and still remain parallel to this surface. So that's as tight as it can be and still point the oil flow at the gears using the orientation that's shown in the picture in the manual. While we're here, a note about the fiber gear. This fibrous material is the original gear material that Volvo put in it. They wear out because they're fibrous. You can replace them with aluminum or steel, but you get more durability, but you also get more engine noise. So from what I've read, fiber is the quietest, but wears out. Aluminum is a little more noisy, lasts longer, and steel is more noisy still and lasts even longer. So this is the timing cover gasket. It stayed with the block. The back of the timing cover itself is clean other than the portion of the oil pan gasket. So I'm going to put this back on. I'm going to put a little black RTV here and here, but none around the outside. I'll clean the inside of this cover before I do it. Then I'll get the RTV and then bolt everything back into place. So the material I used is Permatex Ultra Black Gasket Maker Oil Resistant, and it wasn't a new tube, so I tried to open the spout to get some out. This is previous gasket maker filled the cone exit, but instead of coming out the end, it split from the side and came out from the side. So I don't have film of applying it up here because it's so messy, but I spread a little here and here. So now we're going to replace the timing cover. I'm going to put the bolts back in the order that we put them aside in the pattern of the timing cover, but I'm not going to tighten them down yet. This is an original Volvo service manual called the Green Book for P1800, 1800S, and they don't publish a lot of torque values, but they do have the crankshaft pulley bolt, which we took off, so we need that. It's 51 to 58 foot-pounds, and then they have oil sump bolts at 6 to 8 foot-pounds, and so I'm going to use that same spec for the timing cover bolts, so 6 foot-pounds. So I've inserted all of the timing cover bolts. I'm going to just tighten them finger tight. Then we'll bring the torque wrench, torque them correctly, Now we need to use a torque wrench to tighten the timing bolt covers and the oil pan bolts. I prefer this digital model. I've used the cheap mechanical ones from Harbor Freight before, and I end up twisting off bolts. Continuing to tighten these bolts to 7 foot-pounds. After switching to a 1/2 inch socket, we'll tighten the oil pan bolts to the same torque spec. To reassemble the crankshaft pulley, you'll note this key and that the pulley is not symmetrical. The thicker edge that has the timing numbers on it for crankshaft position go towards the block, and we have to fit this key into the shape on the collar around the crankshaft. Now, crankshaft bolt, and it needs to be torqued to about 55 foot-pounds, 51 to 58 foot-pounds according to the manual. I've set my torque wrench to 55 foot-pounds. We'll tighten this down to spec. So I had to chock the wheels. Now that we're turning it clockwise to tighten the crank bolt, it wants to move the car forward. I chocked the wheels to give us more resistance as we torque this bolt. Now we'll put the water pump fan pulley back on the front of the water pump. And next we'll put the fan on with the 4 bolts, but I can't hold the camera and do that at the same time, so I'm going to put the camera down, put the 4 bolts in, and then resume filming. This was a little tricky to get everything lined up, so I took everything back out. I turned the water pump so that one of the holes was straight up. That allowed me to know where to put the pulley with one hole straight up, and then get the first bolt in on the fan. Now I'll rotate it around and put the other 3 in. Don't have a torque spec for these bolts, but also there's no room for a torque wrench, so I just tightened them by hand with a wrench as tight as I could make it while holding the fan with my other hand. To reinstall the fan belt, we have to get it past the fan blades and then over to the pulleys. There we go. And it's got to go on the main pulley on the bottom, so I'm going to have to do that from below. Here we are to get it on the bottom of the crank pulley. And with the fan belt on all the pulleys, I can now tighten the belt by pulling on the generator. I couldn't film and put that on at the same time since it required both hands, but 2 1/2 inch wrenches pull the generator out until the fan belt is tight, and then tighten the bolt down. So now I think we're ready to start it up and see whether the oil spout being repointed solves our problem. So we've started the car up, got it slightly warmed up, and you can hear, particularly here at idle, the noise we were talking about before we started, but clearly haven't solved the problem. putting everything back together and starting the engine, it's clear that the sound isn't cleared up. I'm not sure whether it's any better at all because it seems to come and go. But even though the actions we took in this video didn't solve my problem, they're still valid to show you how to take the timing cover off, how to inspect the fiber timing gear and the timing gear oiler. I'm going to keep looking for what else could be causing this problem, and I'll update you in a future video if I make some progress. Until then, thank you very much for watching Reworked, and as soon as parts come in, I'll be doing the video of the 71 BMW 2002 front suspension rebuild. Thanks.